O-V-E, love is a solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E, for the evolution and blessed unity with the L-O-V-E, love is a solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E, for the evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Self-Love Show. I'm your co-host, Dawn Light, here with my beautiful sister, Trish Wright. We have a really special show today, and I'm going to read a little bit. But before I do that, I just want to tune in and say thank you to our weekly viewers. We love you and appreciate you so much. And for those that don't know, we have a YouTube channel. We would love for you to go explore there and explore all the previous shows. Like, share, and subscribe. And if there's a show that you know would help and impact anyone you know out there, please share it with friends, because that's what this is about, is like really deep self-care, deep self-love and honoring of self always, right? And like expanding our consciousness. And so here we go. Today's show is a very, very deep and tender topic. And I think we've all experienced it in our life, loss, right? And so we're really going to speak about grief, how to hold a loved one who is grieving a loss, with Debra Chapman. We have a beautiful guest. Deborah is a death doula. I'm going to read a little bit about her bio right now. So the only things in this life that we can count on are change and death. Both often come with big, overwhelming feelings. These could be experienced as discomfort, anger, fear, sadness, etc. And we've all been in transitional spaces in our lives. And what did you need in that moment? And maybe you've been with others going through hard times, or someone who has experienced loss. Did you know what to do, what to say, or how to support them? It's a really great question, right? So join us as we discuss strategies to create safe and sacred space in which to hold conversations that nurture the griever's experience and support them through the acceptance of a life impacted by loss. So Debra Chapman is truly compassionate doula who values what is important and sacred to the people and communities she is honored to serve. Deborah has been serving life, death, and grief from an early age and has chosen to apply her lived experience in service of others, death and dying, as co-founder and doula of Death Transitions. An avid learner, she continually seeks out supportive training to offer clients through Death Transitions, a certified care doula and minister, and she has expanded training in world religions, trauma-informed care, and nonviolent communication, and is grateful to the people and organizations from which she has continually receives learnings. Organizations such as Doorway into Light, School for Accompanying the Dying, INELDA, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation, Wilka Roy, Yolo County Hospice, School of Birth, Breath and Death, CARE, Communication Dojo, Community Healing Circles, and among others. So many, right? Beautiful. And her volunteer service with Joshua's House, a hospice for the unhoused in Sacramento, is representative of her offering to serve the underserved, misunderstood, underrepresented communities from which she draws her strength and courage. And a lover of earth and life lived in joyous wonder, she brings practical knowledge, innate wisdom, and honor to serving the dying and their loved ones. And without further ado, thank you, Deborah, for being on the show with us today. We are really honored to have you. Yay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
First, I just want to share a little bit about my connection with Deborah, because it's so sweet. I met Deborah totally randomly at a class, and it was just like an instant connection. You were courageous enough to just show up, and how you've landed in my life is in a whole capacity around spirit. Like, we have met on the spiritual plane in many, many ways. And you've been a fuck yes to all of it. And she shared with me that she was a death doula and these things that she was sharing with me. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And I had an experience with death that changed the way that I relate completely, like many years ago with a friend named Andrea. And what you were saying felt so, it felt so right and real and alive for me, because it also wasn't this like way that we look at death and the way that we look at loss in this, I mean, the way our culture shares it, right? You were delighted in it, and you were joyful, and you were celebratory, and you shared with me about taking care of your friend who is dying of cancer. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh yes.
you even like invited me to meet them, and they were just so beautiful. And it really inspired me to look at how I grieve and how I show up for people and how we best can love each other more deeply and more vastly in this place. And I'm curious if you can share just a little bit about your views and how you hold death, how you hold loss. Grief.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions, both of you. How I view and hold grief and others' grief, I find it a celebratory gift of life to have these experiences, to have these emotions. And I shared with you the other day, just yesterday, Trish, that in my meditation over the weekend, I had a profound download about how the tears of grief are love's physical manifestation after surviving the loss of a loved one. And I find great beauty in that. It's so real to be in the spaces of people dying and grieving. And I think it blasts everyone's ego to the core of who we really are. And I find great beauty in that. In short.
Yeah, grief. I've thought a lot, and I've read some things before that grief is love unexpressed, or and I've been thinking a lot about that piece as well. That there's this well of love, that there's this like human beings, I don't know if you all do this, but I do this, but I project a lot of shit out in the future, like a lot of things. And just recently I read something about parents that we think that we have, like, oh, I'll get to see my parents again. We're not actually thinking far enough out. Like, oh, I get to see my parents 2 times a year or once a year. And what we're not actually considering is that I might only see my parents another 4 times in their lifetime, or 5 times. Like, we're not actually thinking about the capacity, the time frame capacity, or the and I was like, it really hit me. And I ended up visiting all of my parents fairly recently. I know I'm working on it. So we project a lot of things out in the future. Like, I got, oh, I'll see them again. Or, oh, I have so much love to give them. But it's not, it's like a well. It's like I'm holding this well that I'm not expressing out. Because I think that it's like it refills itself. And I think, and I feel that grief is one of those things, is like, I have so much love to share with him, and so many experiences or things like that I want to share, that I no longer get the opportunity to share in this physical plane. And that's,
I so agree.
and another thing,
not to cut you off, but I've talked to some people in grief, and how I sit with grief is really analyzing what you're grieving are the things that you've lost, the conversations, the meals, the trips. And it really is about you more than the dead.
Yeah.
It's really how you are responding to not having those things in your life again.
Yes. the perceived opportunities that we no longer have.
I also think of it in terms of, you know, when we're grieving and the tears we're shedding when we've lost a loved one, it's also a way of ushering them over to the next side. Like every tear that is shed or every emotion that is expressed, you know, yes, it might be unexpressed love or, you know, what you were just speaking about, but it's also, if you think about it, like our love is so profoundly strong and impactful that we're actually carrying them over to the other side. Every person that's grieving their loss is also building the rainbow bridge of love for them as they're transitioning to whatever that next journey is for them.
I love that.
So beautiful.
So as many of our viewers have seen either on social media of some kind, is that I lost my most secure attachment parent in this lifetime, my most securely attached parent. And that was my stepdad, who, if you appreciate really anything about my personality, you probably would love him because I'm literally him in a lot of ways. My humor and the way that I love to help and find, you know, the ways to just build community and forgive. Like those are lots of pieces of him. And I've been thinking a lot about this place, and I'm glad that I get to talk to both of you, because not only do I love you dearly, I also trust your connection to yourselves and the spirit realm and your higher selves. And what I've been thinking a lot about lately is that it almost feels like Miles passed on Tuesday night, and that there's a feeling of his like the physical feeling of him no longer being present. Like there's a lot of space inside of me now. Does that make sense? So it feels sort of like where there was once like a energy or a warmth or a place held, it now is like organized somewhere else. It's like kept somewhere else in my body and in my spirit or in my psyche or like, do you know? So some part of me, that feeling of grief and loss in my chest and in my solar plexus and in my shoulders, like there feels like a lot of space. And for all of you who are watching, I'm wondering if this lands for any of you. Like, have you had this experience? But I'm like, this is where my brain wants to take it, is like, oh, it's organized differently. It's like in the library of my psyche, it now looks like it belongs in a different section of the library. And now there's like this, it's like, oh, what's going to go here place? And that's part of the longing or the missing. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting way to put it, but it does make sense, you know, and it is retraining ourselves to really surrender and allow, like, what was the physical is no longer present. And it's like learning to tune back in to spirit and say, you know what, I'm not disconnected. I'm never disconnected from their soul. I can commune with them. I can dialogue with them. I can reach out to them and have like a one-on-one connection if there's things that were never said that need to be said, or unresolved difficult pieces that, you know, if it's a difficult person we've lost or a really deep close loved one and you never got to see them before they passed, you know, for one more time and say your closure, you know, if it was a shock, like you know, people's deaths come in all shapes and sizes and ways. And I'm just speaking to all of that, right? And so there's this way of you can open the portal and just, you know, commune with their soul. There is no disconnect there, and they want that. they actually are seeking it and will come into your space and commune with you if you allow them to.
So true, Dawn. I can speak, just for your listeners. David, who I was caring for from cancer, I cared for him for 4 years. And after he passed, no more than 3-4 days, the physical feeling of his hands on my rib cage as I slept, saying, I'm the caregiver now. And it was so beautiful.
That's so wonderful.
So deep.
Yay. And
my eyes.
I mean, we'll all cry today.
Totally.
We're all grieving. Yeah, I don't know what I was going to say, but I wanted to share that.
So I want to share. So what I'm really hoping that this particular call or this show today is that we weave in how to self-care during times of grief, as well as how to care for another person. And like there's some experiences that I want to share for everybody watching, so that to be helpful. I kind of want to talk about, okay, let's go for self-care first. So I got the call at 12:30. I keep my phone on silent, but of course my stepmom called twice, and because it overrides the, do you know that it overrides the do not disturb thing? It's amazing. So I got on the phone and I really felt that moment. I was there with her, knowing that my stepfather had passed. Like I had listened also to my intuition. So I'm going to actually backtrack a little bit. I listened to my intuition, and I know that my new brother, who Miles found off of 23andMe, thank goodness. I know I found a new brother. He was there in the hospital, and I just had this overwhelming sense that I really wanted to whisper in Miles's ear. I wanted to tell him that I loved him. And it was maybe a minute or two, but Dustin called my stepfather, and I was like, turn up the volume because he's deaf. Puts it up to his ear, and I said, Miles, I love you. I want you to know that I love you, and I know that you love me, that your children love you, that Lacey loves you, and Dustin loves you, and that I love you, and the children that you fathered and stepfathered love you. Your wife loves you, and we miss you, and we want you to come home. We love you so much, and we know that you love us. And it was just as simple as that. That I listened to the thing, that like intuition, the piece that was drawing me. And that night he passed, and I got the call, and I was able to just be with Linda's moment, with her experience, with her hysteria, knowing that the person closest to her is now no longer her support system. She also has cancer, and she's really, really sick, and she needs care. And her caregiver is now gone. And I got off the phone, and I sat there for a second. I went to lay back down. And the person I'm with, my friend Misha, he's here, and he was like, can I hold you? And I was like, yeah. I just sat there in sort of shock. And I let myself be there. And that's the key piece, is like I let myself be in shock. And I got up from that moment. I was like, okay, I gotta get up. I gotta sit in front of my altar. You're welcome to be here with me, but I'm gonna pray. And I'm gonna talk to Miles. And we got up, we made a cup of Tulsi tea, and we lit candles. We lit a 7-day candle for him, and we prayed, and we lit his way home so that he wouldn't have to walk in the dark or alone. And it's not like this grandiose thing. It wasn't like, hours long. It was just me sharing. It was even me sharing like damn it, you're not supposed to go. What the hell, man? This is inconvenient timing. Just sharing my truth. I was like, this is not how we planned it. We talked about this before. You're going back on your word. Like, it was just a real, true conversation. And it was a real sharing my want for God or creator or universe or whatever it was. Like, I named them all. Great mystery. I was like, light this man's way home, and so that he can shine his light and love on the people who are still here, who will miss him. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit about sort of like those sort of self-care rituals or practices for people who are going through loss.
Yes. I was thinking more from the viewpoint of people trying to help people that are grieving.
Yeah. Take it wherever you want to go.
Because, but that's okay. I can switch. Grief is different for everyone, depending on the relationship to the person that died and who they are as an individual. So there are no knowns. You can be hysterical. You can dive into project managing your life after this person is lost. You can be completely avoidant and just carry on as normal, and it'll catch up to you a year and a half, 2 years down the road. So grief is as unique to the individual as it is to the relationship of the person that has passed. So as far as self-care, anyone that has kind of self-care practices, meditation, spirituality, mindfulness practices, going into grief is going to make it so much easier. When you don't have those practices, hopefully you have good people around you that will be birds in your ear, just tweeting like, hey, maybe you need some nourishment. Let's make a chicken broth. Like, let's go for a walk. Let's take it slower. So I think that's all I can say about self-care, because it's a varied landscape, but just being kind to yourself and allowing space for grief and not throwing any expectations on how you should be acting.
Yes. Profound. Yes. Yeah, I've been supporting one of my clients has gone through a bit of, a really upheaval in her own life due to a really close family friend passing, one of our closest. And, I've been holding her in that process through, the coaching container that's been coming forward unexpectedly. And it's kind of shifted the coaching container a bit because of it. And it's been so profound and such a gift to just be with her in her presence of what is coming forward and the meaning in it all. And there's also the aspect of when we lose someone close, and there's all the pieces of life that have to be managed and dealt with, when the logistics that come along with the loss, and where, the shoulders of those people that it kind of lays on, and helping those people in that process, right? So there's so many aspects of the journey of what this is. And, grief is something that, we all like you said, manage and deal with it differently. And it's so important to just honor each person's journey and what's coming forward, and just be as open and generous in spirit and helpful as you can with whatever the material in the consciousness may be. And it's okay that you don't do all your normal to do things that you need to do when you're in a grief cycle, and really just allow yourself to, it's okay if those normal things or planned things that you had on the calendar may get rearranged to make space for what this is, because it's big and it's life altering on so many levels, depending on who it is and how it lands for each person. And so I just wanted to speak into that also, because that's a huge piece for people. And, it can be left, where it's like years later, you're still dealing with pieces of it. In my family, when my dad died, we're still dealing with, how the money and will and all of that is handled. Like, And my dad died in 2019, and it's still going on because there's been a court proceeding, and so that wraps into people's grief. It's still not clear and complete, right? And there's like this long process that can go on. And so we just need to put it on the altar and pray to Spirit and give it over and say, guide me here, show the way, guide the way for all parts, all pieces, all persons. May it be in the highest and best good, for each person. I can share a little bit of a process if you want. So this is what I did for when my dad passed. I'm going to be a hot mess when my mom does. God bless my mom's health, but my dad, it was different for me because I had a difficult relationship with him. So it was like I was prepared on a lot of levels on some way. And it was relieving on a lot of levels, and it was completion on a soul level for us. And so, but I still felt a lot of grief and a lot of compassion for where he was in his state. And so I created a friend of mine recommended this to me, and it was so helpful. And I've given this to many clients since then. And it's what is known as how to build a grief altar for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to say it's super simple. It's symbolic more than anything. And I just invite you into building an altar based on, your love for that person. And, you can find an image of them. Like this was my dad and I, like me as a little girl, And so I put that on the altar, and I made a separate space, not in my normal altar space. So I picked something that was blank, clean, open, where it was just its own thing. And then I took a bowl, like any bowl, I used this bowl, and I put the bowl there. And then I put a little deity of Kali, because she's like, for me, she represents like, she's cleaning and clearing, like definite, like, let's clear this out and like, let's help you make this transition. So I put this little tiny deity of Kali, because she's kind of her own thing, and she can't be on any other altar with any other, like Lakshmi or Ganesh or, Mother Mary or any, she needs her own. She's that big and powerful in that way. So I just was like, this is the perfect place for her. And then I just took blank pieces of paper, not even in a journal, or if you do write in a journal, but the whole symbolic reason for the bowl is to just take some blank paper. And when you feel a sudden amount of grief coming on, I invite you to write about it and just hold space with yourself and open with a prayer and just ask Spirit to really move through you and hold your heart and really allow you to pour out what the contents of the grief are into the writing, and then go for it and just freeform write. Just get it off your shoulders and out, like pouring it out of your heart into this, and then collect them, ball them up and put them, you can fold them as little notes, you can ball them up, however you want to do it, but put them in the bowl. And then collect as many bowlfuls, and you'll intuitively know how long to keep the grief altar open. You can make it elaborate, or you can make it super simple. I did a very simple process because I believe that it doesn't have to be elaborate. It can be very simple. And so I collected probably bowls full, and it was a mix of rage, frustration, anger, anger at the way it was unresolved, of how it's been left, all those pieces. And, just the sadness and the compassion that I needed to express, and just the moments that I was remembering, the moments of my life shared, the good, the bad, the hard, all of it. And I just wrote, and I wrote continuously, and simultaneously. It was interesting because I had left it open in my psyche. I wasn't sure about how long this period was going to go. I just was like, I'm just going to leave it up until I intuitively know. And then my cat passed, and I midwifed my cat. She died in my bed. I put blankets and towels down for her to lay on, and she wanted to be midwifed home. So I literally midwifed her home, and she passed in my bed on Mother's Day. And so I felt that was a close, midwifing her, my kitty. And so I took all my writings and I decided to burn them. And I took the ashes, and when I buried my cat, I put them in with the cat, and I just made it a symbolic burial of that whole process and a close of my container, put flowers all around the garden bed where she was buried, and really kind of blended the two together. And that was my own process. But Spirit just told me so clearly, like, now's the time to burn the papers. And like, you can spread the ashes, or if you decide to burn them, or you can bury them in the earth and make a actual true ritual of like, I'm closing this and it's complete, you know. Excuse my cough. I was sick for a week. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. I hope that's helpful. And I again, Trish, I just want to speak this into the now moment. I love you, and I'm here with you in your grief, and I'm sorry for your loss.
What I hope by sharing like what people are going through, like maybe sharing the experience that I'm having or what self-care looks like while grieving, that for the people watching, that they can see how, like in this sharing, how to help the person who's grieving. Because what I'm noticing is that that people have a lot of expectations about how, like, I'm supposed to show up. Maybe, I mean, in their own grief, in their own understanding, they have like needs for me to hold their feelings. I'm like, whoa, I can't do that. Like, there's other things that I'm doing. Like, there's other things in my life that I'm actually trying to accomplish that I can't let drop. Like, there's ways that I need to communicate. So what's happening is there's a lot of phone calls. I love that people want to share their love, and it's like kind of random. Like, there's people coming out of the woodworks that I haven't spoken to in 10, 15 years. And I'm like, shit, it's a whole extra job for me to respond or to reach out or to call or to, you know, and I'm like, I'm already on the edge of overwhelm. Doesn't make sense. Like, I'm already like, I'm kind of on autopilot. And luckily I have another person here who's like, oh, you probably need to eat right now. Cause I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And I'm like, I got to do these things. And like, kind of deer in the headlights moment. I'm not the only one. And I know that. So it's like the texts and the calls and those things, they're overwhelming. And I love them. And I know that people want to share their love. Like, that's what keeps me like, oh, I love that. And there's a place of, I don't have capacity to hold many other people's emotional stuff. I have capacity to hold my stepmother's stuff and my immediate family stuff and my own stuff. And that's my capacity. So as we think about holding someone in their grief and in their experience, we have to understand that maybe our love or our support might come off as extra work, or it might come off as, and I love what Deborah said, is that allowing the feelings. Like, I'm just allowing what comes up. I'm not judging it. I'm like in the middle of something and I'm not even thinking about Miles, and all of a sudden I'm just crying. Like, okay, here we go. Or I have a memory, or I want to listen to a song, or I'm just allowing the psyche, the body, and the spirit to be. Now, if you wanted to help me in this moment, it's just witnessing. Mostly it's just witnessing. And for me, the things that would help my stepmom or myself or our family is like, how can you make the technicalities, the paperwork, the bureaucratic shit, how can you make that easier? How can you share your love in ways that don't make me responsible for your feelings? So there's ways to do that. Another way is like, can you send financial help? because it's expensive. Funerals are expensive. His medical bills are going to be expensive. He was in ICU for 5 days. Like, can you just be with the randomness of what's happening for me without trying to fix it, change it, or judge it? Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just doing it. I'm letting my body do the thing. And so those are a couple ways that, like, for me, standing in someone's grief is just being, hey, do you want to talk? Can I listen? Would you like some distraction? Can I feed you?
The walk around the block.
You want to walk? Yeah. And take it away.
Well, you spoke to a lot of it, the experience of the overwhelming phone calls, as someone who wants to support someone who's grieving. Definitely be mindful. Those weird texts and voicemails from someone you haven't talked to in 15 years, it pulls our energy away from where we need to be in our grief, 100%. Another friend had died recently, and someone asked me how they could help that person. And I go, well, there's a lot of attention in the initial stages of someone dying. Everyone's there. They're throwing all their energy. How can I help? The overwhelm that you're feeling right now, Trish, people want to be there, express their love. When's the funeral? Blah, blah, blah. But what happens after about a month or two is that settles down. And that's when the really grieving people might need someone to come around and check on them. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's when you make the phone call after the initial rush and excitement, and continue to check on them, send them food baskets, invite them out. But yeah, those it's crazy, our little society about the phone calls and stuff. I see it every time. It's nuts. Like someone just lost their partner or their father and their phones are blowing up. Are you kidding me, people?
I don't. Yeah.
take a breath.
Yeah. And I get it because because they also want to share in celebration of his life. The I'm sorry's. So I view it as, I'm sorry for your loss, as I see how much he meant to you. I also want to celebrate him in your love. And I see it like that. Like, that's how I see it. And it's also distracting. And I also get another thing that is, it's making me a little like, so how did he die? Well, he got sick and he passed really quickly in the ICU. I have this like copy and paste thing that I'm just like copy paste. And then, well, how? What disease? Like, they want to ask questions about it. And I'm like, I don't feel right about that. I don't feel right about sharing that. Maybe later. But if you go to his wife, I will reach through the computer and in your ear and say, stop it. Like, what is the necessity to know the details when clearly someone doesn't want to share? And treading lightly is treading lightly, just taking a deep breath and asking yourself, who is this for? I often ask this question in a lot of pieces of my life, but this is one of them, is like, is the reach out or is the questioning, is it for me or is it for the other person? Like, if I'm actually reaching out to you, Deborah, and you've lost someone, is my reaching out to you for you? Like, am I just being there for you, or is it fulfilling a need for me, a need to like feel that like compassionate, helpy person thing, or am I just able to just be with? Like, some of my closest friends are just like, hey, I can just be with you if you want to talk. When you want to talk, I can just be with you when you want to talk. Freaking helpful. So helpful, because that right there gives me spaciousness to move around, and I know that I will come back around to wanting to share, because I'm also sort of numb. There's an aspect of like, I'm not disconnected and I'm not detached, I'm somewhere between non-attached and
You're still managing shock.
yeah, I'm in shock.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If you can, try not to add more shock or more work or energy or overwhelm to the people who are grieving. And, I just want to say that it's not just death, and it's not just, it's transition spaces. Grief happens for people when they're like moving a new home. Moving is crazy. It's a crazy transition. Grieving the rhythm of life. It can be with relationships or with, ego deaths. You have to grieve that person that you were. There's a lot of those pieces there that we put a lot of weight on death. We also don't want to talk about it. I don't know what that is either. We want to talk about it, but we don't want to talk about it, but we want to be taboo and like, we will die. People will die. Things will die. Plants will die. Animals will die. Transitions happen every day in our life. Deaths, little deaths happen in our life. And that's important to just recalibrate. Even if you wanted to hold someone in love in their grief, re-evaluating your own relationship to death and transition and grief can be helpful for that other person when you show up for them. Like if I have this, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm deeply like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I'm not actually experiencing like that. So that's what I mean by checking who's it for and how you might be projecting your feelings onto another person. It's different than saying, hey, Deborah, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And it's different than this. Deborah, your family member or the person that just passed, I see that this could be a big thing for you, and I'll be here for you when you're ready. I love you. I'm sorry for your loss. Versus multiple texts of like, I'm sorry for your loss. It must be so hard for you. Like, and I'm like, don't tell me how I'm feeling. Fuck you. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I know that Dawn and Deborah, you probably have experienced those things in your lifetime where people are projecting their ideas of how you're perceiving or dealing or processing the information, and how unhelpful that was.
I am no psychologist, but I have some opinions for sure.
Give it to us.
Well, part of it, the natural inquiry to find out how someone died. We want to make sense of the world. But I also see that people are asking that question and they want to cast judgment. Like, how does that type of death relate to me? And will I be experiencing that type of death? Or what can I do differently to not experience that type of death? So I see it as a judgment. I don't see it as a healthy question whatsoever. Mm. So for those people that are around people that have lost someone, maybe don't ask how they died. They'll share if they want. You don't need to know sometimes. Yeah, that's a big one. And then the overwhelm piece, we've already discussed that. I lost my train of thought, but there we go. The judgment piece. Don't ask unless they tell.
Yeah.
Make sure someone's around them giving them soup. And if you're not that person, for the person grieving, let them know you're available to them and wait till they reach back out. And maybe, like I said earlier, wait a little while after all the excitement slows down. When they might really be lonely after the funeral, after the wake, after the cremation, after all the rituals, like maybe that's the time to reach out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very wise what you're saying and bringing forward, because it's very true, especially when someone loses someone deeply close. You know, I have a good friend that lost his wife, and she was struggling with a cancer, and she called forward before she passed a group of us, and we all went and like held her in a very beautiful way. And then when she did pass, we were there, and she, you know, wanted to pass away where she was staying with her beloved, and you know, there was some conflict in their family around that choice, like, you know, and so there was struggle on that end after she was gone, from, like, you know, again, that piece around how all the things that happen after. And I found that my friend really needed a lot of support during that time, but it was very beautiful, sacred rite of passage, you know, for all of us involved intimately. Like, we got to, like, moments after, I mean, my husband and I took the dry ice for her body, literally, like, to there. And we were able to, like, literally, you know, prepare her. And, like, you know, it was a really profound thing. And to prepare the dead and to be with the body, and, like, right at those precious moments of transition, and, you know, pray over her body, and, like, have this very sacred rite of passage. It was life-changing. And, you know, it was a rite of passage for me in that way. I'd never done that before. And I, in turn, kind of became a little bit of a death doula at that time in my life. Like, I've done blessing ways, I've done all kinds of, you know, rituals, but that had never been one for me. And now I can honestly say I've also served in that way. Not that I'm stepping into being a death doula or anything, but it was a really profound rite of passage to offer that, and to just be with, and, you know, bless my friend's heart. You know, it was a really tough transition, and, you know, he moved on, he packed and moved from there, because it's like he had to, like, you know, it was just like, it was so heavy, and the weight of, like, you know, caring for someone and then their transition, and, like, it was life changing, you know, life altering. And so just being with and just offering a lot of love. And we just kept kind of extending out occasionally. Hey, you need anything? How are you? You know, and just with no inquiry about anything else, but just like, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, I'm here. You know, and that's really it. Like, somebody needs that. You know, we all need that in times of big transitions, you know, and grief. And sometimes you don't know what you need, and you can't even say it because you're so going through it in the moment. You're not aware that, oh, fuck, I really do need help with that giant pile of unattended to things that I haven't, you know, that I need to organize. Or, you know, you're just not, your brain isn't able to source it because your capacity is so full of emotion and what's going on that you kind of forget all the adulting human things that need to be tended to sometimes. And so just kind of touching back in and saying, hey, you need anything, gives that person an opportunity to source, like, yes, actually, this real thing needs to be tended to.
These are such beautiful strategies. Like, it's so loving to be compassionate enough to be with someone and to just walk with them. I mean, that's in general in this lifetime, if we can, like, stay out of judgment and check our own projections. So what I'm curious, Deborah, as a grief companion, can you share a little bit about what that is? I mean, so maybe, and I don't know, so for some of us who are watching or listening, can you share a little bit about what a death doula does, and what a grief companion can do, and then share kind of like the recap of your strategies for people to show up for another person while they're grieving? Does that sound good to you?
I would love to. Death doulas. Hi, everybody. Death doulas, Dawn, your death doula. Death doulas are the people that are called to assist people when they're dying. They often don't know that they're a death doula, but they're the people that are always there supporting the community, or the ones that are dying. We are there to help people through, as Trish said earlier, the technical aspects of dying, just sitting with someone healthy or ill and going through your advanced directives, medical power of attorney, statutory wills. You know, let's make a death plan for you and get it in place, and it can always be revised. And then let's talk about a legacy project. My favorite legacy project example is David Bowie's Black Star album. He knew he was dying of cancer. He went and recorded a beautiful legacy project. That is a big, so death doulas can take you all the way through the technical into the death plan and beyond. And then you have your funeral and your grieving and your death plan. So that's death doula, which, you know, we're there as caregivers. We're integral to the hospice team, to the family caregivers. I spoke more directly about the technical, but we're there to create a safe space for the dying and their loved ones at the time of their active dying or throughout the caregiving process. But you can work with a death doula while you're healthy. You don't have to wait till you have a diagnosis. And I would love that. Let's do some paperwork. Let's talk about death. Grief companioning. I want to say up front to your listeners, like, there are doctorates on grief psychology. And so through the tiers of titles, of course, you have the grief psychologist. And I ask anyone that has experienced a death or is caring for someone that is grieving to reach out to hospice, because they offer 6 months of free grief counseling to the grieving families and partners, or, you know, direct person in that person's life. So really encouraging people to access that. Unfortunately, the person experienced the most heaviest grief, the partner, wife, husband, is typically so much in a fog that they don't actually utilize that 6 months of free grief counseling through hospice programs. But you have grief therapists that you can seek outside of the hospice scenario. And then you have grief coaches and grief companions. At the time that you reach out to a grief coach or companion, you are in a stronger place and you want to speak with someone in a non-judgmental area to, you know, when we express our grief with friends and family, we might be wearing a different cloak. And so we can be super vulnerable speaking to someone that you don't have to show up in a different way to, that you can just be completely raw, open, vulnerable, and angry. So grief companions, you know, let's talk about your grief. Let's talk about how you lost someone, what steps you're taking to work through your grief. Let's talk about how grief is never going to leave you and how you are going to embrace grief as a new companion in your life. I think that sums it up for now. Do you have any other questions?
My question is, can you recap some of the strategies for people who want to help?
Yeah, so I think it kind of came up fluidly through the conversation, but you know, really being mindful about your relationship to the person grieving is key in reaching out, asking information from them, and trying to be present while they're dealing with the loss of someone that they've loved. Leaving all expectations and judgment at the door. Everyone's grief is different and unique. So when you're frustrated that your friend hasn't got off the couch for 2 months, that's you, that's not them, that's their grief. You get to go make sure that they're eating, maybe encourage them to take a walk around the block or bring fresh flowers, whatever it might look like. So leaving expectations, judgment, recognizing your relationship in that family circle. If you are a second tier out person, what I like to share with your listeners and watchers is something I've learned is comfort in and dump out. So Trish, specifically in your scenario, you're giving comfort to your stepmother, but you need to have someone outside of the circle that you can dump out your emotions, because you won't be a good caregiver to your stepmother if you don't have a safe space to dump out. So comfort in, dump out, and be mindful of that when you're walking into rooms of people grieving. You know, the biggest thing I could share is just the witnessing, the acknowledging, the being there, You don't even have to do anything. Just show up and sit there. Maybe light some incense. Maybe go clean the bathroom. That's a huge thing, helping people function. If you're good at the paperwork and you want to take it over and you won't have to rely on them too much to get through some of the questions, do that. And yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, and Dawn, thank you for sharing yours. You both have lived vibrant, vast lives, and I'm really grateful to have this conversation right now, especially well, for obvious reasons. But again, we create death as such a taboo in this lifetime, and our relationship to it is such a disjointed and disconnected one. There's cultures that celebrate, like in Ireland, you die and they put you on the coffee table basically and have a wake and they party, they fucking rage around you and they're like, you were amazing, and have this like whole thing literally immediately. And there's other places where they, family members come and wash your body and take care of you and wrap you and they adorn you. And then they celebrate your life. Yes, they're grieving the loss of, or the missing, or the no longer being able to communicate with this person. There's places where they unbury your body every year and like clip your nails that have grown and care for your dried up body, and redress you. They redress you in new clothes. Like it's just such a different experience about death where it's no longer part of this like you won't be able to talk to this person anymore. No, you just get a new number. I know Miles' new number. It's sitting at my altar. It's talking to him when I think about him. Every time I say a bad joke, it's him. It's like those are the places I get to talk to him. He doesn't go anywhere. It's just his voice no longer is in my cell phone. It's here. It's here. It's the other thing that I wanted to say also is that he'll never leave me. Like he's not a past tense. He lives through me. Every time I remember him, it's in the present moment. Every time I make a shit joke, that's in the present moment. Every time I behave as though, like there's so many personality traits that I picked up from him. That is living in the moment. That is here right now. That is him through me in this moment. Like that's the place. Like, and I'm really okay with that. Like that's what is helping me stay.
Honoring him and keeping him alive.
He's here.
Mm-hmm.
The person you love in this being right here is a lot of him. People know that. People see that. Like that's a big piece. Is just honoring those things about them, the memories that you have. Oh, and one other thing, I find it more helpful. This is just my own personal. Instead of the sorries or the this emphasis on tragedy, to show the memory of him, or a picture, or a quote, like something I would rather have a memento that touched you about him. Mm-hmm. That's a gift. That's a juicy tidbit of a gift. I'd rather have that.
Nice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that piece of advice.
For anyone who's really interested in hearing more about Deborah's work, or what a death doula does, or some really cool things that she's starting to do, around death and understanding that whole process, find her at these links.
I also wanted to say a good read that my client was recommending is called Bearing the Unbearable by Joanne Cacciatore, I think. And it's a good book dealing with grief, loss, losing someone that is very, very close. And it's very much been a very good read for her. She's just absorbed it and loved it. So I just wanted to put that out there for those that are needing a book during, you're grieving and you want something to really, read and hold as a thing, that could be a really good guide. Yeah. And thank you again, Deborah, for coming on and just bringing your light. And I appreciate the work you do in the world. It's such a needed thing to help people in those transition times is pivotal.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Share a little bit about the thing that's coming up in December.
I can. If you go to my website, deathtransitions.org, and the events page, I'm starting my Doula Tea Talks, and these are just informal conversational workshops. There are 6 different workshops, and they'll be on a 10-week rotating cycle, so you can tune in and drop out however you wish. But we will go through what is a death doula. We'll go through advanced directives, medical power of attorney, how to get those forms, how to fill them out, statutory wills, all the good things I discussed earlier that we can do while you're healthy and if you're ill. Like, let's get that done, and let's take care of your grieving when you're dead. If they have that guidebook, they get to just grieve and follow the rule book. So I encourage people to tune in. Love to see you there.
That's so helpful. It's like helping
so
people.
helpful.
The things that, I've had conversations about wills and what to do when things go, what to do. My parents have been wanting to talk to me about it, and just seeing how this was not an experience that Miles and Linda had, and how it's just, there's so many pieces. There's just like so much to do, like how to get into bank accounts,
a lot.
How to get into bank accounts, what to do, what he wanted, how this works, and she's trying to deal with some of those now things, as well as all the crazy calls and stuff that she's getting. She's just poor thing.
Mm-hmm.
Dawn, Deborah, thank you so much.
Paperwork.
Yeah, that would be so helpful. Just do the paperwork for us.
Yes.
Is there anything that you'd like to share, Dawn?
Yes. Yeah, for those beautiful women out there seeking to expand their relationship with trust and reclaim it and come home to a greater level of loving inside of yourself and in your relationships, especially for your relationships, please, please, please come jump in the group, Reclaim Your Trust. We're going to put the link in the chat box, and it's a beautiful container of women just exploring their relationship with trust and having, there's some amazing tools in there that I've created. And it's just a really beautiful free Facebook group that will really expand your relationship with yourself and help you have, an expanded relationship inside of your relationship with your beloved, your partner, and come home to, the places where you've been stuck and where you've had some, sticky spots, and maybe even where you want to, shift gears into a new way of relating and having that love you've always asked for and wanted. This is the container for you. So come on in. We're excited to have you.
A big shout out to Sign Network, Summer and John Raymer, for being amazing, and who also just sent me the most sweet, loving message. And Scott Katamis for always just holding me and us in such loving, compassionate arms. Thank you for being the muse, and for also, inviting us into opportunities. I love you. we will see you next week, Thursday morning at 10 a.m.